There's a lot of distractions out there. Don't let them get to you, because remember, that is their job. Their job is to distract you. Their job is to market to you. Their job is to get you to buy something. So just tune that stuff out.
Welcome back to the Plan to Rise Above podcast powered by P.M.G. Wealth Management.
What we're going to talk about is the 6 biggest money mistakes people make.
That is going to be a little bit about the mindset that I've used in my own head over the years.
And that's one of the things I've always respected about you is you've made it from the bottom yourself. Like, you didn't make excuses. You just kind of put your head, you worked, you just got it done, and you kept that momentum throughout your life.
Well, if you could make it, I can make it, right? So how hard could it be? Like, even though I'm 14, you start to get to be a little independent. So at some point in time, I'm like, that's fine. I'll go pay rent. That's easy. And, I started working 30, 40 hours a week. At some point, you have to look more inward and go, okay, well, what did you do today to make your life better?
What changes your life is what you do every day. It doesn't matter who's making those different decisions. It's on you to make changes in your life. I started with 0. Ryan started with 0. Phil started with 0. And we've all lived it, in our own lives and built those accounts to $100 million accounts. But it takes time.
You can only afford 25. Hey, start there. It doesn't matter. Just start to build that finance muscle memory on savings, and it goes from there. No excuses when it comes to starting. There's something out there where you could start with $1 probably.
Welcome back to the Plan to Rise Above podcast powered by P.M.G. Wealth Management. We're very excited about all the activity we've already gotten on our social media, YouTube. A lot of people have reached out via email, questions, people that we haven't heard of in a couple months or a couple years reaching out and saying, I saw the podcast. I think that's pretty cool so far.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, right? We can't... we definitely have. This is going way better than we thought. We're starting to get comfortable with the mics. We're starting to get comfortable with the headphones, right?
Yeah, I don't think our LinkedIn page has ever got so much action before. I mean, it used to be just, me, my dad, and a couple other people liking it, but now it's really starting to blow up.
That is a little scary, right? It's weird. It is weird seeing yourself out there on video, but I don't know. I'm getting slightly addicted to it, maybe.
Yeah, no, it's weird now. It's like people are actually watching, so we appreciate the support, and hopefully we can keep it up.
Yeah, so we have a couple items we want to talk about today, right? The first one, I guess, is going to be maybe a little bit boring for these two, because I'm going to end up doing most of the talking in this section, but that is going to be a little bit about mindset and some of the mindset that are little lines that I've used in my own head over the years as I've grown, essentially, right? And then what's the second half of this episode going to be?
The second half is going to be the 6 biggest money mistakes. So that's something you don't want to miss, because these are things we see people do all the time, and it really screws up their finances, and you could learn a couple things from them and take away and make your finances a lot better.
Yep. And then anything in there, Ryan, you want to ask about or go in? Anything on your mind?
I mean, just keep listening. I mean, you're going to learn about some of the life lessons that we've seen people do and make mistakes on, but there's solutions to all of them. So stay tuned.
Perfect. So I'm going to jump in, I guess, to the first half of what we're talking about today, which is largely mindset and kind of some of phrases that I picked up along the way that kind of helped me get through a couple things, I guess, and just kind of go from, being a college kid or a young adult college kid to starting in finance to where we are today, so to speak. And before I get into those, there's largely 3, but before I start on those, little bit of a history. We've kind of touched on some of it. I always do tell clients, so clients watching this already know this, but for anybody else, this is brand new, right? Like I do say, we do come from the bottom half, the bottom 10%, the bottom 5%, maybe somewhere in that range economically. Kind of the deck was a little bit stacked against, so to speak. And at the same time, I'm not a big believer in a lot of that stuff, so I don't want to offend anybody there. But just so you know, what I'm talking about, we've lived it, we've seen it. That's where I'm coming from. But essentially, right, so my parents had me at a very, very young age. So my mom was 17. My dad was 21 when I was born. So statistically speaking, that was kind of doomed to fail. 4 years later, they got divorced, which kind of makes sense in a weird way, right? So, and then I was raised by my dad, who was a blue-collar worker, truck driver. Just, again, a lot of things kind of already starting off kind of bad, and having younger parents and whatnot. At the same time, my dad was blue collar guy, and I would always like to say loved to fight, loved to defend the turf. Had a lot of ideas in his head in terms of he grew up in the city. He was definitely much more of a throw punches first, ask questions later type of a guy, and no consequences. And so that's essentially how I was raised, and life kind of goes on from there, right? So,
and job-wise, too, he was always jumping between jobs as well, so there was never really like a stable income, right?
Correct. Yes. We lived on and off unemployment, on and off food stamps. I like to say he had a propensity for knocking out dispatchers. somebody looked at him the wrong way. He would, like I said, he would just throw down and maybe even to a fault as I got a little bit older, still like 10 or 12. I also think at some point he kind of relied on the system that was out there a little bit too much. I think he liked the time off, right? So there was a little bit of that too, where he's like, okay, well, yeah, I could go make money, but it's just me and my kid. Life is not that difficult. There's only two of us. So maybe he wanted to just kind of sit around and not do much.
And you could collect, was it food stamps and unemployment income? He was just living off that.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. And like we didn't do, now on some negatives on that, right? We would never do Christmas. I never got Christmas gifts forever. I think one year he had a pretty good year, pretty good bonus. I remember getting, a new bike and whatnot. But for the most part, we never really had anything. And like I would go to my mom's, we'd end up getting gifts as kids, and I'd come home from my aunts and uncles and stuff, and we'd have like 2 or 3 bags. And then my dad, of course, would throw a fit because I had nothing on his side, right? So it was also the pain that kind of comes with that poverty. I understand that. And then the violence that comes with that poverty, I understand that. And I won't get into some of that. But nonetheless, like as you kind of get older, you kind of start to take on a little bit of a mindset and a little bit more of an awareness of, okay, well, I can stay in this mold or I can try to break out of it, right? And for me, like the other weird oddity was my freshman year, so at 14, and I was already working here and there, but at 14, my dad lost a different job, and he basically gave me the ultimatum of going, okay, well, I can't afford it to live up here anymore. We can either move back to the city or we can go to Florida. It's a lot cheaper down there. Or you can get a job and pay rent, right? So, and again, because I was raised by my dad, and these are pluses and minuses at the same time, you start to get to be a little independent. You start to get a little cocky that, well, if you could make it, I could make it, right? So how hard can it be? Like I'm even though I'm 14, I'm a lot smarter than you are. I've seen some of the dumb stuff you've done, right? So at some point in time, I'm like, that's fine. I'll go pay rent. That's easy. And, I started working 30, 40 hours a week my freshman year.
What was the first job?
First job was a pizza place.
Yeah.
Second job was a pizza place. Then family owned. So maybe key note there, right? There was DCFS or whatever. Like nobody really gave a crap back then,
was
right?
it Pizza Hut, right?
No, that was later.
Okay.
That was later. So no, this was a family owned establishment, and I was there for about 2 years, and that was actually really good. So I learned to cook, all that kind of stuff too. And they had more than pizza. They had like a full menu of stuff.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's too. I mean, that's one of the things I've always respected about you is you've made it from the bottom yourself. Like you didn't make excuses. You just kind of put your head, you worked, no job was too small for you. You just got it done and you kept that momentum throughout your life.
Yeah. Now at the same time, like when you're young, you don't need a lot either. There's a little bit of a rope for you to grab onto, right? Because you're like, well, I only needed, so the rent, right? I had to give my dad $200. Now this is 1989, 1990, whatever. So $200 back then is probably like $500 now, or maybe more. But it wasn't that like unattainable, so to speak, right? I mean, minimum wage was, I remember, like $4 when I started. It might have even been $3.75, but I think it was $4. So and then very quickly I got a raise at $4.25. So there you go. But nonetheless, like what I'm getting at is like, yeah, once you started paying in and you paid that money to him to essentially for us to afford our rent, right? Anything above and beyond I had to pay for, right? So I was, so I was just like, hey, if I wanted to eventually, right, I knew I was going to be turned 16 at some point. So I did buy my first car. That was $2,500, which I saved up for. So I got nothing from him for that. So again, you just start, if I wanted a pair of jeans, I paid for those, whatever it was, right? If I wanted baseball cards, I paid for those, right? So you just started working. So at that point, like I was like, well, I could just kind of work a little bit and get by, or I can kind of ramp up. And so at some point, like I'm like, yeah, I just want to consistently make more money, so I just had more stuff, and which is not healthy it went from that perspective financially, but that was the first motivation. So nonetheless, as we kind of move through that, right, there was and Gen X, and the person doing this, helping us with this podcast, by the way, is also Gen X, so he'll understand this. We were mostly raised on TV. We like to laugh about the movie lines in here.
Yeah, we never pick them up, or at least I don't. Ryan's a little bit better than me.
I pick up a couple, George.
Yeah.
Yeah, George, you're a little weak on the movie lines.
Phil's like, you got to watch this movie, before you get to office next week. I'm like, yeah, we'll see. If it's before 2000s, to me, it's a little bit too old.
Yeah, I don't get that. But whatever. Yeah, they had.
What movie did you say no pay raises until you watched?
Godfather?
Goodfellas.
Oh, I did
Goodfellas.
watch it. I did watch it.
Yeah.
John's giving us a look over here like, you never seen that?
Yeah. Like George has still not even seen Goodfellas all the
I
way
did
through.
watch
I've
it.
seen
and
one
it
of
is a
them.
great movie. It is a great movie.
It's an amazing movie,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's an amazing movie. So Gen X to a degree, right? Latchkey kids, whatever, was raised on TV, right? So for me, I have to say, like, yes, there is mindset number one, and now finally my little backstory getting to where I want to get to. Mindset number one is there was a movie, it was, at the time, it was kind of a controversial movie, which was Boys in the Hood, right? And now again, obviously, I didn't live in Compton, so we didn't have it that bad. But at the same time, there was a lot of strife going on in the movie. There was a lot of ugliness, especially at that time, right? Going on. It's an older movie, but a little more graphic, whatnot. And if you fast forward or just go back to that point, there's a moment in time where the kid, who's like the star of the movie, is going through a lot of different issues, and he's talking to his dad, ironically, for me anyways. And he's going through this situation with his dad, and they're out by the water somewhere, or whatnot. And the kid just keeps making excuse after excuse after excuse, and he wants to go and kind of fight back, so to speak. And the dad says to him, basically saying, well, hey, what did you do today to make your life better? That quote to me is one of those that kind of stayed with me for, I would say, 6-7 years. Obviously stayed with me longer because I'm talking about now, but for a little while, like, that quote was always one that I would look at, and even like my dad or other people around me, if they start making excuses like, my boss screwed me, this coworker did this, the president is out to get me. I'm like, the president doesn't even know you. Like, what are you talking about? So like little things like that that just kind of always made me laugh. And then I would go back to, well, whatever the reason is, why are you having a bad day? And again, there might be some real shit going on that's why you're having a really bad day. But at some point, you have to look more inward and go, okay, well, what did you do today to make your life better, right? And you could just live with the excuse, and you can go down that, very easy to go down that rabbit hole. And again, I've lived it, I've seen it with, kind of a thing. And it's just something that I always wanted to stay away from. So that's kind of where it started, whether it would be, again, just working at a pizza place. And maybe you start on the phones, and you're like, hey, I'd like to be a waiter. And then you learn how to do some of that. And you're like, hey, I want to go and cook. So I was always just trying to do whatever the next thing was, whatever, wherever I was at, just like, look at who my boss is. I'm like, okay, well, can I be my boss? And then at some point I'd be like, yeah, I can be better than the boss, So that's kind of where I was always, that's kind of where my mindset started at, was some of that.
I even remember when I was an intern here, every day it'd be like, what'd you learn today? Like, how'd we get better today? And then just like drilling that mindset from the start, it's something I've taken away and something I've learned from you.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad. And again, it's not really financial necessarily, right? But that does go into the big piece of like, well, why are we not able to build wealth? Why, because we do get a lot of clients that are very much distracted, right? So like I said, like, what did we do today to make ourselves better? And we're going to get to it even when we cover back the next half on some stuff. Fast forward, I did go to college, put myself through college, came out with a lot of debt, paid off debt, got my first job as an advisor. And at that point, I'd already been working 8 years. I worked 4 years of high school, pretty much full time, and I worked 4 years of college, pretty much full time, plus went to college. So I was very cocky as a 21, 22-year-old at that point. So as I'm applying for my job, of course, one of the things I think that landed me a job as an advisor was the fact that I can sit in front of a boss for the first time and say, yeah, I've been working full time for 8 years. I'm basically 21 going on 29, or I'm 22 going on 30. And then I have all the other life experiences goes with it, right? And that's where I landed in this job. But then I remember when we landed in Naperville, in my rookie office for big firm, we ended up on a floor. There was 2 floors in that building of advisors, and I ended up on the second floor that had a number of people that had a lot of experience trading stocks or managing money at larger institutions that then wanted to be individual advisors. And it was a great office to learn a lot of stuff in. And one of those advisors, though, would always use this phrase. So this is phrase number 2, which is, keep the blinders on. I know you've both heard me say that a thousand times. So, right. So that's one that, same thing, again, looking inward, of when you get these outside distractions, you just have to keep plowing forward and keep those blinders on. So again, maybe not financial advice, but like, how do you stay motivated on the task at hand? How do you keep yourself centered? How do you keep, again, moving forward day by day? All of those kind of things when life throws you lemons, so to speak. You just got to keep getting through it.
Yeah.
So-
And what would you say at that point of the life? What were some of those distractions that you had to, avoid getting too caught up in?
It was, I mean, I would say like from a basic standpoint, right? I mean, it was 1997, and we were cold calling back then or doing some seminars, right? Cold calling does not work today. That's a whole nother topic. But nonetheless, we have at that time, right? It was a little bit of a cat and mouse game, and you'd call people, and of course they'd hang up on you. They would be very, very rude to you, and it's just easy to get down on yourself. You're like, oh, why am I doing this job? Whereas again, I was a finance major. I did also study economics, and you're like, okay, well, I'm really smart at this stuff if you give me a chance. But when you start out as a rookie, you have no clients, so you have to you do kind of revert to having to sell, right? And back then more so. So when you fall to more of a sales role as a rookie, it is easy to get down yourself. It just hammers away at you, right?
Yeah, a ton of rejection, right? Every day,
ton of rejection,
just nonstop.
Yeah. So a ton of rejection. So there's that. So yeah, so you got to just keep those blinders up, so to speak, and keep moving. And then, of course, then there can be the politics of the day, whatever that was at that point in time, or it could be a family issue at the time, whatever it is. Like, you just always have to keep moving forward and kind of, in a weird way, like, I don't want to say you're not stepping on people or stepping over people, but you're kind of stepping around things, right? And whatever's coming your way, you're just like, whoa, you just let it go and ole. And then you just kind of keep running. And
you've always mentioned too just the ability to navigate. And I think I can't remember the exact term you used, but it was like you're on the bus, and sometimes you're gonna get a flat tire. You got to fix it, get back in the bus, keep it rolling, keep it moving. And sometimes you're gonna hit a traffic jam, and you just got to figure out your way through it.
Yep.
And always talk about that.
Yeah, and again, it's easy to get depressed. It's easy to go down the negative side of life. So it just you just always want to keep going up, right? And then I would say, obviously, as my career got a little better, business got better, of course, revenue got better, family, start having kids, whatever, the whole thing, get married, life gets a little better in there. As we saw that improvement, of course, then I start thinking back, well, okay, well, maybe we're onto something here, because not only, am I keeping the blinders on, and that appears to be working, what did I do today to make my life better? Well, that seems to be working, right? And whether that be reading, picking up a book, right? I mean, I don't know if I always tell you this, but I try to read one new book probably like once a week or every 2 weeks.
Once a week?
Yeah, like I read a lot. I read a lot at home on the couch. Pre getting into that phase, I spent a lot of time, internet when that started and researching all that kind of stuff, right? So maybe to the point where, obviously now we have this podcast, to the point where I'm going, well, I got to stop reading. I need to start talking, because I've seen all this stuff, a thousand times.
You lived it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like time to regurgitate it out of my mouth instead of just into my brain. But either way, you're always trying to improve on yourself. And then that's where you get to the third one over the years of either competitiveness. For me, again, competitiveness of either sports or industry, stock market, right? Trying to improve there. And it's that 1% mindset, right? Which is, okay, well, what can we do one thing better each day? So at the time, let's just go back to even the cold calling example, right? Maybe it's doing one more call, right? So if you did 50 a day, it's doing 51 a day, right? Or it's you're making the hardest call early in the morning, right? You're like, okay, let's just get the one thing out of the way that I didn't really want to do today. Let's get it done. So you attack the day early, so to speak, and that's also worked kind of well, So
it's huge. I mean, you got to start your morning right. I think there was a book with the Navy SEAL. He's like, make your bed every day. That's your first task of the day. Get it done, and then that momentum will carry out throughout your day. And like Phil said, your first phone call, maybe it's your toughest meeting, your toughest client, whatever it might be, just knocking it out, because then the rest of your day is even better. You just get the momentum to keep rolling.
It's just gravy. It's gravy. And then again, throw in the reading. Again, even if you spend time on the internet, working out is a huge one, right? Whatever it is. And even take it, so we're talking life in general, but let's just say working out. If you're charting your workout and you're like, okay, today I went up from, 135 pounds on the bench to 145, that's more than 1% improvement. There you go, right? So you should feel good about that for that day, right?
That's part of the reason, even myself, I love working out, because I know no matter what happens that day, at least I did, one positive. I had a minimum. I feeling better about my health, and then hopefully, there's other things throughout my day that were even better on top of that. So just getting something going in the right direction.
Do you think about golf? If you go to the range one day and expect everything to be good, like following that. No, it's not. You got to go one day putting, one day chipping, one day something else. You got to make sure it's building. You can't just expect results on the first try. You got to compound it into something.
Yeah.
Make sure.
So now, speaking of golf, like that's the one thing I'm bad at with the 1% rule. I think I have negative 1% rules on the golf side.
I can relate. I feel like the more I play, sometimes it's like the worse I get. But
sometimes,
Yeah. But the other thing, like I want to just point that out, and then I'll get off my little soapbox here, is that so the first one, right? What did you do today? Make your life better. You know, even though it comes from a movie and it's cheesy, right? It's still looking inward. Number 2 is keeping the blinders on. Again, that's inward. Number 3, you know, obviously tracking activity, tracking, you know, what did you do to, you know, on the 1% increment type of stuff. And there's probably 1,000 other things, right, that you can throw into those same kind of scenarios. But all of them, I believe, start with looking inward, whereas and especially today with social media, you know, in terms of the search bots or whatever else is going on out there, the algorithms that know what you watch, they know what you're looking at, and it's very easy and dangerous to go down that rabbit hole. Politics can get very ugly, obviously, and there's just a lot of distractions. So if you have all these distractions going on, you know, you got to remember just not to let that be too loud. And you have to focus back inward because, again, like even some of the politics, like that doesn't put food on the table. That doesn't help you and your wife. That doesn't help you and your kids. It doesn't help you plan for retirement. It doesn't help you plan for college, right? So I feel like much that you see on TV, I barely watch the news, right?
Yeah.
So like I barely watch the news. And I like almost never watch the weather. I just know we live in Chicago and the weather's going to suck, right? And then you know this too. Like I look at my calendar, like today's Tuesday or today's Wednesday and we have this today, but otherwise, like what are my meetings tomorrow and next week? I don't look at what days, what day hypothetically is the 4th of July or when does New Year's fall or when does whatever. Like I just look at like what are the next 10 days? Like that's it. And I don't really, you know, I mean, yeah, if I plan a vacation, obviously that gets stuck in there, but for the most part, like I don't really pay attention to, well, today's the 15th and today is this or what I got going on, the, you know, whatever. Like there's just, you know, I kind of just go day by day by day by day, and we just keep grinding through it.
I would say that happens. The market will be closed, and you're like, I'll be here. And me and Ryan are like, I don't know, it's a 3-day weekend. We're golfing or something.
Yeah, I get it. Like, you know, when I was younger, I definitely looked forward to that stuff a little more. But yeah, now it's like, yeah, what, you know, I don't know. I just gotta stay busy and keep helping out with things and charity and all the other stuff, you know. But nonetheless, I just say there's a lot of distractions out there. Don't let them get to you because remember, that is their job, right? That is their job is to distract you. Their job is to market to you. Their job is to get you to buy something. Their job is to get you to, again, politically, their job is to spin you to political donations and PACs. You know, they want you to watch those other, you know, those channels, so to speak, for advertising, and that is their job. So, you know, just tune that stuff out. Go pick up a book and go make yourself better, and that's where I'm going to leave it. So.
Yeah. Well, one more thing to add, too. Like, I don't want to get into politics, but, you know, no matter who's in office, it could be Trump, it could be Biden. Like, what changes your life is what you do every day. You know, it doesn't matter who's making those different decisions. It's on you to make changes in your life, not as much from them.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So where are we going next?
The next section we're going to talk about is the 6 biggest money mistakes people make. To Phil's point with keeping your blinders up, some of these, by having your blinders up, you can avoid making these mistakes. The first one I wanted to get into is not thinking like an owner. I got a question for you guys. Who do you guys think is the wealthiest NBA player to date?
Michael Jordan.
Gotta be Jordan.
Curry, like LeBron. So there's a guy that none of you guys have probably heard of. His name is Junior Bridgman. So
who the frick is that?
Some random guy that I didn't even know of until I started researching it. The most he made in a year was $350,000, which is a lot, but for an NBA player, it's relatively small. That guy is worth over $1 billion today, and his whole mindset was ownership, thinking like an owner. He got to that wealth by buying assets. He was buying companies, acquiring stocks, different things that were income producing assets, and that's how he got to where he was today. So the first money mistake is not thinking like an owner. If you want to be like him, where you can really build true wealth, you got to think like an owner.
So wait, was he a player?
He was a player.
Okay.
But he used that money. He used his salary to buy assets. Where a lot of people use their salary to buy, they just spend it or they don't. They buy liabilities, nice cars, nice homes, and they never acquire
Lambo.
assets. Yeah. So you got to do both. I mean, there's always balance. So you don't want to, just have crappy cars, crappy homes. You got to find a happy medium, that fits your lifestyle.
Yeah, and that kind of goes hand in hand with like high income doesn't mean high wealth. You got to make sure you're doing these things. Thinking like an owner helps you build that wealth over time. You didn't build this wealth over a year or a day. You built it over a timeline, investing in long-term investments and businesses.
Yeah, it takes decades before you really start to see, the benefits of doing it over a long period of time.
All right. I like that one. I would add one other point on there, would just be, if you're thinking like an owner, you're also looking at the different divisions or segmentations of, life or that business or investing or whatever it is, right? So you have to spend time to research each one of those things too, right? So if you're the owner of a manufacturing business, you obviously know logistics, you might know some administration, you might know marketing, you might know, right? So I mean, your knowledge goes a little deeper than just the employee who is in marketing, right? So it's so I think that's pretty important that if you're going to think like an owner, then you need to go down and kind of figure out how each of those little divisions run too.
Yeah, exactly. And then we see that even at P.M.G. I feel like you got to wear a bunch of different hats, as an owner, and then me and Ryan got to take on more responsibilities than we would at just a traditional job at a large corporate company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sink or swim, baby.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we got to add that to the list.
We are gonna throw you in the deep end here. So yes, yep, very much so.
And that's the thing, you learn by doing. You gotta. For me, I've always learned best when it's a real life experience. Reading in a textbook is one thing, but going out there and doing it day to day, that's whenever you really start to pick it up. And then, Ryan, you want to take us into mistake number 2?
Yeah, mistake number 2, focusing on cutting spending instead of growing income. I mean, yeah, here's the truth. Cutting expensive can really only go so far. You can clip coupons, you can cancel those Netflix subscriptions, you can skip your morning coffee at Starbucks, but at the end of the day, you still have bills, groceries, and other responsibilities. So you need to be building your income, not only cutting your costs. So you need to be going out there, working your hardest, showing up early, putting in that 1% every day, and make change for yourself.
Yeah, and you can only cut your expenses, so much, as Ryan said. Like, at the end of the day, you still need to eat. You still need a roof over your head. The mindset shift you have to have is income has no upside, right? So, like, at the end of the day, find ways to advance in your career, or maybe have a side hustle, or different ways to bring your income higher. Because, like we keep harping on, you can only cut so much. Income is limitless.
And then I would add, just popped in my brain now, is, we've had a number of clients that started with one company, let's say company A, and then they left and they went to company B, and they got a promotion and new responsibility, and then they went back to company A in a higher level where they started, right? And they would have never got to that level because they were capped or somebody was ahead of them. So I think one, you got to look at, inside your company where you're working to do better. But then sometimes you have to look outside too, not you guys. But again, if you work for a corporation, don't I would just say keep that resume updated too, because it's easy to land in a job and stay there for 20 years, and this is how it's going. But we see it because, again, we help a lot of people with their 401ks, and we see them job jumping, so to speak. But they're always getting really good raises. It's not like they're just doing it for no reason. I mean, they're getting, their life is getting better by doing it. And ironically, we've had a number of people that go back to company A, 5, 6, 7 years later, and they're way ahead of where they would have been if they would have just wrote it out. So.
Yeah, and I will say, always know your value. Don't sell yourself short. Like if you do plan to stay at a company for 20 years, just know you're being paid fairly, and just always do. Spend an hour, once a year minimum, just researching, this is what people with similar skill sets make, and this is what I make, and do those line up? So that's an important thing to look into.
Very good.
Yeah. So mistake 3, overvaluing small wins and ignoring those big ones.
Yeah, this kind of touches on what we talked about before, but like sometimes people, they're all in to find the best deal on the new TV, right? Like one's $500, one's $300, and they'll do hours of research, figuring out, driving across town to find the best deal on the TV, which is great. But you need to focus on the things that move the needle, those big wins. That could be a salary raise. That could be doing more tax planning or automating your savings, things that really move the needle for you in your life. Those are the things you got to focus on.
Yeah. So, is that like the penny wise, pound foolish concept, right?
Kind sort of. I mean, I just
right, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you've influenced me in that way. You got to think big, because I think even starting out, I grew up, I would always worry about very small dollar figures for something, and it's like if you always have this small mindset, you always be small in your life and your career. So you got to think at the big picture and stuff that really move the needle.
Yeah. So I mean, even us for P.M.G, right? Like when I started that, I guess I've only worked for 2 companies, right? The big firm I worked for, besides the little companies when I was in school. But since graduation, I've only worked for, big company for 10, almost 11 years. And then P.M.G since 2007. Obviously, I had to start with my assistant, Terry, right? At the time, that was not easy to carry that salary, but I knew I had to have it. And the leverage that we got from having her around was enormous. And then at some point, right, then we've had a couple of minor ones, but essentially then even like George, your role when you started out of college with me, it was still a big decision, right? Mm-hmm. And it was stuff I could have easily done, right? But at the same time, I'm like, well, I'm thinking longer term, bigger and wider, and where's this thing going to grow to? And yeah, at some point you do have to make some investments back into the business, and you got to spend some money to make money. Is another phrase, right? But yeah, you just got to think bigger and not lose sight on the little stuff. And then sometimes I'm trying to think of a better example of some of that stuff too, on the minor things. Yeah,
so even in your personal finances, it's so important to nail those big purchases. So your home, you got to make sure. What drives me crazy when someone calls me like, I'm buying this home, like, we take a step back. We want to run the numbers first and make sure it fits in with your budget. So home's number 1, right? You got to get that right. Number 2 is going to be your car. So it's vital to get that purchase down perfect. Because if you're paying way too much, it's going to hurt the rest of your finances. And then I'm trying to think the last one, I put one down. Just taxes too. Taxes is another thing, making sure you're optimizing your investments in tax efficient ways, right? Like if you have all your money in a non-retirement taxable account, you're going to owe a huge amount in taxes. Like see opportunities for maybe a backdoor Roth IRA or mega backdoor Roth IRA. Use those to your advantage to save on taxes, because taxes is going to be one of your biggest expenses in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other one too is, when you were going through the list of house and car and taxes, I started thinking, well, spouse. I mean, spouse. Obviously, so much of your spouse is probably the number one thing, right? That you got to get right, because if you do go through a lot of divorces, that is obviously cut in half, right? Yeah, so we got to get you got to get that one right, and but even then, right? That's all joking aside, there's things like that you just have to just make sure you pay attention to, and it's worth the. It's worth the investment. It's worth the money on something that might cost a little bit more.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think your spouse is probably the number one decision you'll make in your life. So you got to make sure you nail that one down.
Yeah, I mean, it was huge for me, and it was, I'm glad no going back there. So that's it worked out well, obviously. I mean, I guess, you can nitpick other things. If a furnace goes out, don't, you see 3 furnace options in front of you, you should probably get the efficient one. You should probably get something that's a little bit... maybe costs a little bit more. Don't buy the cheap one, because you will pay more over time, right? There's a lot of little things like that. So, all right, so good. I think we hammered on that one.
Yeah. So into the next one, this would be mistake number 4, delaying retirement savings. I always like to tell people the best time to start was yesterday. The second best time to start is today. So it's something. It's never too early to begin. Put in any amount. We've talked about this in the last podcast. It could be $20, $50 a month, just something to build those consistent habits early on is huge. Anyone we meet with when they're in their 40s, right away who started in their 20s versus who's just getting started. They're way behind. It's harder to teach them the discipline later on in life, where the people that have been doing it forever, it's easy. They get it. they understand, what it takes to be successful.
I mean, I kind of have an example of how time helps with you. Like over this past weekend, I was up in Fond du Lac visiting a friend, and we were kind of talking about finances, and we were talking about accounts. And I was like, well, I've had my TOD account for probably 15 years now. And they're like, well, how'd you get it so big? I'm like, time. It takes time. And doing this compounding every year, it helps. And adding to it helps too. But you got to just be in the market and save. It's not that
and we
hard.
all started. I mean, I started with zero. Ryan started with zero. Phil started with zero. And we've all lived it, in our own lives and built those accounts to $100 million accounts. But it takes time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it definitely takes a lot of time, and early and often, obviously, and then even again, back to the first part of the podcast, the 1% mindset. Even if you start with $25, right, and then you can do that for a couple months, and then maybe you're like, hey, I can do $35, right? It doesn't have to be a huge amount. Yes, we would prefer $100 goes to $150 or $200, or $500 goes to $1,000. But again, if you can only afford $25, hey, start there. It doesn't matter, and just start to build that finance muscle. That muscle memory on savings, and it goes from there. No excuses when it comes to starting. I think 25 is probably the minimum, right? With some of these funds, if you go direct, maybe it's even less. So there's something out there where you can start with basically with about $1 probably. So. Yep.
Yeah, and that leads us into our next one. As you really start to build that wealth, you're gonna start. It's just human nature to compare yourself to others. So one thing we want to avoid is comparing yourself to your neighbor or your colleague and what they're making, because you got to live your race and do the best possible things you can for your life. There's always going to be someone richer, luckier than you, no matter who you are. Even, Jeff Bezos probably looks at Elon Musk and is like, he's got a bigger boat. So no matter who you are, there's always going to be someone that's more ahead. So focus on your finances, your life, and to Phil's point, how to make yourself better, every day.
That's why Bezos works out so much.
Yeah, exactly. He's got to catch up somehow. Elon's all nerdy looking, so at least he's got him there.
Yep.
And that kind of goes with keeping up with the Joneses, or keep the blinders on. Think of a horse. They have blinders on during the race because they know their main goal is that finish line. They're not looking at what the other horses are doing in the race. They're focused on their main goal and to win the race.
Yeah, so we really, focus on yourself. Avoid lifestyle creep too. You see, your neighbor's got a nice new Audi, right? And you're like, man, I really want one. And it's like, well, you might not be there yet in your point of life. So just keep the blinders on, focus on what you can do. And then as you do get your income up, just something you could do to help your finances, save 50% of those raises. Don't let lifestyle creep keep up to you. Because if you all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm making 10% more this year, and you automatically increases your expenses 10% more, you're no better than you were last year. You're in the same spot. So if you do it right from day one, you automate it, you're going to be in much better shape.
Yeah, and like I said, I can give 100 examples today of that too, but I still go back to the easy ones of when I was in Naperville starting out, and I remember going out to very, very nice subdivision, and like I said, I mentioned this on one of the previous podcasts, right? Like BMW in the driveway, Mercedes in the driveway, and they couldn't put together $50 to put in a 529 plan for their 3-year-old, right? And it's like okay, you have 2 really good jobs. Obviously, your credit's good. You can apply to get these cars, but you don't have another $50 or $25 for that. So that is definitely lifestyle creep, and keeping up with the Joneses. And that happens a lot today. It happens a lot around us. So those are things that you have to dampen down at some point. And it's and I know it's hard, but you gotta go without some of the toys every now and then. Just make sure that you're checking those other boxes first and saving the 10%. And we'll get into that again, but saving at least 10% and things like that. If you're not doing those things, then put the toys aside. So.
Yeah, and once your expenses climb, it's really hard to go back. Once you get used to the nicer lifestyle, nicer hotels, vacations, everything like that, it's hard to go back to where you were, back in the day.
And then what do we have for the last bullet? What's the last bullet point we got?
Last one's going to be obsessing about not having enough. I see this with a lot of people in the years leading up to retirement. They're they're like, another year, I'll keep going. And it's, if the goalpost is always moving, you're never going to be satisfied. So you got to, at some point, you got to find, what number works for you and what works for your situation, and say, hey, I'm content with where I'm at today. This is going to support my lifestyle for the next 30 years because there's always going to be more. And you got to be able to draw that line in the sand somewhere. And that's where we come in a lot of times for clients is helping them figure out what exactly that number is, what's going to work for them in their life.
I mean, I've got clients that pop in my head right away on that one. That
I knew you'd have an example.
They keep working, they keep going again, which is kind of, it is kind of good because obviously, they've built up enough money for a reason. I like to use another term that, like, even me, like, I'm always looking over my shoulder, like, where's the competition coming from, or what's the next shoe to drop, so to speak, right? Like, oh, something's going to go wrong. So again, if you get to the point where you've got enough money to retire and you're essentially then delaying it because you're moving the goalposts, like, part of it, obviously, you eventually got to, draw that line and move on. But I think it's coming from a healthy spot initially, but then at some point it gets to be a little unhealthy, and it ends up being a mistake for sure, right? Because then you're wasting time, and you're not, you could have been enjoying that time a little better, and instead of still sitting at a desk. And often the people that we do see that do that need some convincing. We go through all those numbers quite a bit. We'll tear them apart as much as we can, to try to break it and test it. But those people that ultimately decide to stay and still work another year or two, even though we've said they, given them the blessing, like, they're largely miserable in what they're doing, right? It's not like they, you might have a random business owner that loves what they're doing, but most who delay are not happy with the job that they have.
Yeah, and most people really never end up spending down their assets. I mean, we always run as a precaution, run the plans through 100. And granted, not everyone lives 100, so there's a lot of times there's excess. But people more often than not are spending less than they would be able to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that'll be something for another. That'll be for another future episode on Monte Carlo and all that type of stuff. And the people do end up with more money than they started with most of the time.
Don't let fear of not having enough money stop you from living your life. I mean, you got to celebrate those big wins. So taking a vacation every now and then doesn't hurt if you're doing everything else correctly. And money is a tool, not the score of the game. You got to remember that, and it should go good.
Yeah, and to wrap it up, for our viewers out there, pick one of these mistakes that you can focus on and, eliminate from your life and get better at. Because we might not be able to get all of them right away, but if you can do one and just really hammer on it, you're going to be better off in the long run.
And that's like the 1% mindset thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it all ties together.
Back. Yeah.
We all go back to that, right? Which, again, is inward thinking and making yourself better type of a thing. So, yeah, that's great. Right?
If you find it helpful, share it with your friends. Subscribe on your YouTube channel.
Yep.
It really helps us out, too, when you're commenting. Like, give us your thoughts, your feedback. If any of the mistakes you think we're missing or any of them you implement in your life, we love to hear from our viewers. But yeah, besides that, stay tuned for our next episode, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care.
Hasta luego.